So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Michelle and my very special guest who does not need an introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway. Laurie Cozart is CEO, founder of Brain Squared. She's also author of a book on her own and another book that's got some of Laurie's stuff in it. Executive coach, was the teacher. You were faculty when I went through UC Davis's professional life coaching program, I guess, where I started to get my certification.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from you then. I learned stuff from you before then, and I continue to learn from you. So I appreciate time in the room. It's just a never ending thing. It's the cycle of whatever, the cycle of life. Should we start singing Lion King?
I think so. And it's the same for me with you, Michelle. I always learn something new from you.
What not to do? I'm
I don't
kidding.
think so.
I'm
There have
kidding.
been some times where
I'm
it's
kidding. I'm
what you
kidding.
should
Every
do.
once in a while. So we're gonna kick it off with a quote, and this one is around the topic that we're going to start talking about now. And there were a number of them, and I'm gonna look over here because I highlighted every frickin' one of them. But we've selected one. Is the downstream impact of a leader's actions can transform a workplace into a thriving, empowered community. That was Ken Blanchard. And as I joke with Laurie before I hit record, the rest of that story is ... You could have a thriving community, or they could just tank the whole thing. And as much as I joke around about that, it's freaking real and serious.
Yes, it is.
So the conversation, the topic that we're going to start about, and the thing that matters that comes to mind for me is be very aware of, and Laurie, you refer to it as the ripple effect, but be very aware of the actions that you're taking, why you're taking them, and then be cognizant of the impact to the people. And we refer to it as downstream, but it's like as it leaves your lips, as it leaves your mind, as it leaves the emotions or behaviors that you have, it's going to touch other people. Make sure when it does, the intention is it lands as intended of a good thing that's supposed to actually help and thrive and bring people forward. So I think that's the topic that we talk about. And I think that's why coaches coach. You know, leaders want to be better leaders. So it's like, take the blinders off. Let's see what we've got.
Yeah,
What's on your
absolutely.
mind, Laurie? Welcome to the conversation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate you. What's on my mind is, as you were talking about that, I think about my experience with leaders, and then as somebody growing up, right? As somebody growing up in their career, I think about the leaders who really stood out for me that made an impact, both positively and negatively.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's opportunity to learn from either one. And then what also stands out for me is the work that I do with leaders now, really creating some of that self-awareness around what is the impact of leadership, because it is in my opinion, it's a big responsibility. When you decide to become a leader and manage other people, you have a responsibility to the other people. You also have a responsibility to the organization. And how does a leader manage that, right? How do you balance that? That's what's coming up for me first.
Well, it's interesting when you say that. And how do you create awareness to the people that are on your team that there is a balance? Because it's not just when you're talking about leadership, and then you talked, you know, and my brain goes to there's leaders, which the first person I lead is me, right?
Yeah.
So we're all leaders. We all have the potential to step in and be leaders. And you have leaders that have the responsibility by the people leaders. And so a lot of times what happens is, unless you're explicit with it, the people that are on your team don't necessarily connect those dots, that there's this balance going on between the organization and what the organization needs to thrive. And oh, by the way, thriving means that the people that work in the organization continue to have a job, and looking out for the people. And it's almost like some people say, well, you know, we can't do quality right now because we can't afford quality. Well, actually, quality costs less money. So it's like, how do you balance, you know, it so that when you do the right thing for your people and you have an eye to doing the right thing for the organization, those two things marry very well.
Yeah.
It's leaders that think they can't do one because they have to do the other.
You know, I think well, let me start with most leaders, almost 80% are promoted based on their technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
So it does take sort of a lifetime of self-reflection to figure out who you are as a leader and what is the impact that I am leaving currently. What is the impact that I want to leave? And making a decision while you're growing yourself. And we're responsible for growing ourselves. An organization can only grow and sustain and grow and sustain as their leaders grow and sustain and grow and sustain. So it is our personal responsibility if we want to step into the role of leader or manager, whatever that looks like, to understand that that requires us to think a little bit differently and to reflect on the impact that we're having. And I think I see too many leaders just really get caught up in the tasking side of what needs to be accomplished, thinking that that's getting the results versus creating the relationships that actually get the results and the outcomes that you're looking for.
Mhm.
And I think when you talk about balance, too many leaders don't understand the difference between outputs and outcomes.
Mm.
What are the tasks that we're doing? Do they really have an impact on the outcomes and on the results? Or are they just tasks that we're doing because we're used to doing them?
It's interesting. There's a lot. So my background, process improvement, right? My brain goes to the flags that come up with people and go, well, why do we do such and such? We've always done it that way.
Right.
There's one aspect to that, right? When you talk about leadership, is those for me are the big opportunity phrases, right? We've always done it that way. Great, let's understand why and find out if the situations that created the need for us to do it this way actually still exist, right? But the other part of it too is when you step into stuff like that, how are you engaging people on your team to do that? Because one of the things that you hit on is people a lot of times are promoted because, to your point, they do really great work as an individual contributor. I'm managing myself, I'm managing the performance, maybe I'm working 60, 70 hours a week to be able to get stuff done. And I get promoted, which is a great thing. Congratulations.
Yeah.
But when you go from especially the first time, from individual contributor to the manager of people, that's the thing that you've got to look at it and say, okay, what worked for me in managing me, that I'm going to work 60, 70 hours a week, push through all this stuff. I got people I need to bring along now. And that's where I think we make this leap, to your point, and we're not intentional about, I can't expect everyone to do what I did to get to the place that I'm at. I'll kill people. And that's why I joke around. It's like, yeah, you can still accomplish that stuff, but if you got dead bodies along the side of the road, there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too often that's exactly what happens is we leave people along the side of the road instead of bringing them along. And I think that it really does. We need to shift. We need to shift our thinking when we decide to be promoted. Our shifting needs to shift from self, that individual contributor mentality, into people. And what I see happen though is because that's an uncomfortable place to be, I'll go back and just do all of the tasking, right? I'll just go back to my implementation self, my individual contributor self, and never work to bring the other team members along with me. Never really reached that place where I am a great manager and a good leader. Because it takes a different types of language, it takes a different type of thinking to be able to do that. Most of us are really great at implementation. Not so great when we move into that integration, right? When we start to bring things, people, projects, things together. Not so great unless we've got a great leader that has given us an example of doing that. And I've had really great leaders and I've had not so great leaders. I think one of the things to do, what comes to mind for me in the way to do that, because you asked how do people do that?
Yep.
But there's what I call the 3 R's of leadership. And I think that these 3 R's sort of give us a framework to be able to think about it a little bit differently, how we show up. And because of that, the first R is reflection. Too many of us go through our days completely just in automatic behaviors. In fact, there's some research that says that about 90% of the thoughts we're having today are the same thoughts that we had yesterday. And almost 90% of those thoughts are negative.
Yeah.
So we're in a cycle of negativity, just repeating behaviors over and over without stopping to reflect on the impact of those behaviors on others. Because research also tells us through our mirror neurons that if I have a negative interaction with my supervisor or somebody at work, depending on the intensity, that can stay with me for up to 72 hours. Now, I have lots of leaders who work a lot of hours, but not 72 in a row, which means that I'm taking that home, or somebody else is taking that home with them. So that ripple effect that you talked about earlier isn't just in the organization. It's not just my team. It's not just having an impact on organizational culture. It's actually having impacts on families and communities. That is a responsibility that we need to reflect upon.
It's interesting you say that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But no, that was just, that's the self-awareness that we need to create, is the reflection around what is that impact?
When you were when you were talking around the 72 hours, if it's an extremely negative impact, and then the coaching that goes around on people setting the attention, letting go of whatever happened so they don't take that previous whatever it was into the next interaction. To your point, it's intentional. But what has also happened, because the majority of us work from home now, right? We've got setups and everything else. What we no longer have, the majority, is that transition time. So even if it wasn't 72 hours, there was some break, right? That you typically, air quote, had between the time your day ended and the time your home life started. And for most of us now, it's literally walking out the door, or some people may be getting up from their kitchen table, right? And there's no unwind, transition time, resetting, expectation time. So that's the other piece of it too. For leaders, it's going from meeting to meeting and say, okay, how are you intentionally going to ready yourself for the next engagement so this crap doesn't come with you? Or to your point, how do you not bring it home with you?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the reflection piece of it. What do you want? Too many leaders, I see them not managing their two most important commodities. Now, I know great leaders, they have lots of education, they have lots of experience, they bring a lot of things to the table, but their two most important commodities are time and energy. If I don't have time and energy, none of the rest of that stuff matters. And so I see them not managing their time, and I see them not managing their energy, which is why I try to, explain the 3 R's to them, because that reflection piece tells me, because I think they should bookend their day. Start out with a reflection. What is the one thing, if I did today, would have the biggest impact on the organization or my team? Versus getting all wrapped up in the reaction of answering emails and putting out fires right away, right? So take a half hour if you can, and just set your intention for the day, and then bookend that as you close out the day. How did I do? What did I accomplish today? What relationships did I strengthen today? Because
like
that's
that.
the second R, is relationship.
I wondered, because I'm like, okay, that's an R.
So that's the second R, it's relationships. When we have strong relationships with our teams, with our colleagues, with our peers, with our bosses, right? Everything is easier. People talk about trust all the time. Well, trust is great, but we have to have strong relationships in order to be able to trust each other. We don't just automatically trust somebody because of a title. So how am I building relationships on a daily basis? And I think it really gets, especially now to your point, that people are working from home, the relationships are put on the back burner. People are having to struggle.
They're not as convenient, right? Because before, literally, when I had an office, when I was at Sutter Health, I had an office on site. Colleagues would just stop by my office and go, "Hey, you got a minute? I'm going to run this by you. I'm going to whatever." Well, people don't just stop by in my computer, even though, maybe they'll text or whatever, but it's not the same, because I'm not on the way to anything else anymore.
Yeah.
And I used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Those big hallways, right? Everybody's stopping by.
Yes.
We have to be much more intentional. even if you're not even the scheduled one-on-ones, because those rarely go the way leaders anticipate they're going to go. They're more of, how checking in on the tasking that we're doing
Yeah.
versus really checking in on the person. So we have to be much more intentional about how we're building those relationships and really taking the time to your point, to reach out and
Hmm.
have some impromptu conversations, whatever that might look like. You came
Yeah.
across my mind today. I've got a really great friend of mine who will text me just out randomly and say, "Hey, you came across my mind today. I was just thinking about you. Let's talk."
Yeah.
And it's always such a pleasure to just catch up with him, right? Because just the way that he reaches out makes you want to pick up the phone and chat with him.
It's so funny. It's not a funny haha, but it's one of those things that I think there's too many times, and I challenge myself with it more and more, right? Because I try and talk myself out of it. But someone will come to mind, and I'm like, I don't want to bother him. I bother him? And literally it would be a text or an email to reach out to say, hey, thinking about you. And so this morning, true story, it was a client, and I actually reached out and said, because we had met last week, and I thought, you're on my mind. I just want to check in and see how you're doing and how things are going. He's like, oh, thank you so much for following up. I'm doing. But I went with it. And I think too many times I stop myself because I'm like, oh, they're busy. We're all busy. But to your point, it feels good when someone says, hey, thinking about you. How's it going?
Does feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And to your point, there are so many leaders that I work with that sort of wear exhaustion and burnout as a badge of
Hmm.
honor. And we really need to also think about, I was thinking about succession planning before we came on this call today. And
Yeah.
I- if I've got so many people saying, I don't really want to be promoted because I see what my boss does. It's like,
Yeah.
we need to be able to set the example so that we can create other leaders behind us. I mean, that is one of the biggest tenets of leadership, right? Is
Yeah.
we're there to create other leaders and build successful teams.
Hmm.
And if we're completely burned out, which of course leads me to my third R,
Okay, good. Because I was going to ask, what is it?
the third R is recovery. And I mean recovering your energy because
Okay.
leadership is energy intensive. Leading other people, managing people is leader, especially if you're an introvert, right? It's not that you
Hmm.
can't, it's just that you need to recover energy, and it's all about
Hmm.
energy management. So how are you spending time to recover, whether it's on a daily basis or you take time at the end of the week? What does that look like? And what example are you setting when you actually do that for yourself?
Hmm.
Because don't you feel leaders sort of, you hear the buzzwords, right? Self-care. And everybody's like, stop.
It's not selfish. Self-care is not selfish. I hear that all the time.
It does, but if you really think about it, it's one of the most selfless things that I think leaders can do, because if your emotional muscle is short,
Hmm.
the impact of that is huge. The ripple effect is huge. So it actually, in my opinion, becomes one of the most selfless things that people do.
Well, and to your point, it's so funny. I think about all the stuff that you're saying, things I've said to leaders is people are watching you, okay, to learn about what to do and what not to do, whether you realize it or not, or wish to acknowledge it. They're watching your every action. So, and I think you and I have a discussion I have with other people. It's like, so if you're sending emails at 10 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever, they're watching you to go, this is the expectation. And they're also messaging to themselves. I don't care how many times you tell them that you don't expect them to reply,
Yeah.
that I'm working and so should you, or why aren't you? And then people will put this thing in their head. And you're absolutely right, is that if you paint this picture and you're living this miserable life that everything is given to the organization, you've got no time for your family, your kids are growing up without you, and you're in a miserable distribution or disposition. And if they see you, they go, how you doing? You're going, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. God, I want to be you for a day or a year. What? No.
Yeah. And especially now, there are so many people just completely burned out, not realizing the impact that it's having on the organization's ability to now create some succession planning.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't want to promote. And that's,
Mhm.
again, another reason why I think leaders need to really be reflective on what they're trying to accomplish, how they show up, because to your point, they're under constant observation.
Mhm. Yep. I and the thing is, Lori, when I think about it, it's not about like you've got to go take a month off or the sabbatical or whatever it is. It's about getting more, and I don't know if balance is the right word, but it's actually allowing yourself permission to just unplug or check into positive happy for a minute, whatever it is, right? Take off your cape and send it to the cleaners, whatever that looks like. You don't need to be the superhero. You can also work on empowering your team so that you're not all roads lead to you, because leaders create that.
They
It's like
do.
I joked around with a friend the other day, and married couples do this. I see it as the female in the thing, and I've done it myself, right? You're newly married, the husband comes along and he says, "Hey, you need any help with that?" And you go, "I got it." And he continues to ask, he'll ask at other times, and at some point in the relationship, he stops asking, right?
Yep.
Because you've told him no every time. I got this. Then all of a sudden something happens and you look around and go, he never helps. He never helps. And you're going, okay, but who created that?
That's right.
And
This
it's the
is how
same
we create,
leaders.
yeah, this is how we create psychological agreements.
Yes.
Too many of us are rushing through our day, creating psychological agreements, giving all of the answers. So why should I have to come up with an answer? I just need to go to Michelle. She's going to give me the answer. I don't have to think through, you know, just give me the
Or
answer.
my answers aren't appreciated. I want to come up with answers, but no one listens to me. And so I'm
Right.
just going to stop. Or guess what? If another job comes along and some leader is going to listen and they want to tap into what I have to bring, I'm going to leave
I'm going to go there.
because
That's right.
clearly you don't need me.
Isn't it always interesting? I find this so fascinating that we go through this long process of hiring people. We look at all their experience, we look at their education, we look at what everything they bring to the table. And we're so excited for this person to join our team. And the moment they join our team, we start treating them like they don't know anything.
Yes.
What is
Yes.
that about?
It blows my mind, and we do it consistently.
We
And
do.
it's like, and so the problem is to your point, is that we're in the same cycle.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to stop, right? And say, okay, fine. So what can I do differently to tap into everything that my people bring to the table? Right? I mean, literally, they come with ideas, perspectives, everything else. I was chatting with Pierre Gawand, who does, people on the go and mindfulness and all that stuff the other day. And one of the things I learned from him was perspectives and the value of having different perspectives. And it's like, you've got a whole freaking team of different perspectives. Why won't you tap into them?
Because we're addicted to being right.
Well, and that's the exhaustion, that's the everything else piece. And here's the thing,
Yeah.
we can be right.
Every
We don't have to be right all the time. We can be right.
Well, and to your point, multiple perspectives can be right. So how do we mesh
Yes.
the perspectives together to actually get the best answer?
And you start leapfrogging, and that's where innovation comes in and everything else. And
Yeah,
I and I know it's not a light switch.
yeah.
And someone else I talked to said, well, okay, I'll buy into a dimmer switch, right? So, but how do you start brightening it up, and stepping into that space? So I think that's one of the things. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It can be with some leaders if you're just faking the current process. But if you have real behavioral stuff within you that you need to shift, right? And part of it is I need to be the answer person because that's where my whole identity and value comes from.
Yeah.
It's going to take a little bit longer. Okay. But but that's the thing to start doing, is shifting that so you can get away from all the exhaustion and the everything else. And life is more fun. Work is more fun.
It takes self-reflection, and we can self-reflect, but we don't see the whole picture.
Mm,
So in that, it also takes feedback. And
mhm,
I can actually remember the very first time that one of my really great leaders gave me some feedback because they
mm.
cared about me. And it really did sort of change the trajectory of my life in a couple of different ways. But what she said to me was, Laurie, I know that you want to be promoted, but when you get laser focused on tasking, you have a face that people find unapproachable.
You got a
And
really
so,
pissed off resting face. Yeah.
yeah. And so I have worked really hard my entire career to look like I'm approachable. And Michelle, you know what? I've done it so much to pull my face back to look approachable that I can wiggle my ears.
Really? Okay, I'm not that good. But I have to watch. I remind myself, smile, happy,
Yeah,
positive, because I do like you get into the focus, the brain,
yeah.
and all of a sudden it's like the brain takes over and the rest of the, awareness of everything else. Yeah. And people go, because I'll project this very intense, and people get intimidated. And it's like, please don't. I have a
Yeah.
heart of gold.
Well, that led me to where anytime I hired somebody, or still to this day, if I bring somebody on board into the organization, the first thing that I tell them is how to work with me.
Yeah.
Look, if you ever see me having a face that looks mean or unapproachable, or you feel intimidated, let's talk about it, because that really is not about you. It's about me.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so just putting, dampening the fight or flight response by just saying, hey, let's talk, let me share with you how you can best work with me and how do I best work with you, and really kind of
Hmm.
opening up that dialogue. So, and because then we also created an organization of feedback. I have a rule around feedback, and the one rule I have is, if you can't receive feedback, don't give it.
Oh, good.
So you open up these channels of communication where we're just giving each other feedback. There's no ego attached. I really care about you. You care about
Hmm.
me. Let's figure out how we work best together.
And feedback, it's an interesting animal because I'm pretty intentional about asking for it in situations. And it's tough for people if they're not used to giving it. And so usually it's around this, what did you want more of, or what did you want me to not do, or changes to whatever it may be. But it's still scary as all get up. Even if I have a feeling that went good, and then I want to find out what someone else's perspective of good was, right? And I'm like, oh my, just bring it on. It's going to be okay, because
Yeah,
this is how we learn and grow. But it is still a scary thing. So I don't want people to think, oh, this is a breeze. No, because you're making yourself vulnerable.
you are. And we did a large scale I guess, study on
Yeah.
about 15,000 employees in one organization. We asked a
Hmm.
simple question. We asked one question to the staff, and we asked one question to leaders, supervisors
Hmm.
and above. And the one question was, when it comes to feedback, what are you most afraid of?
Mm.
That was the one question. So staff, here's the answer that staff said.
Mm.
Staff said overwhelmingly what's not being said.
Mm. Interesting.
Management overwhelmingly said, I'm afraid of a poor response.
Oh.
So there's a complete disconnect between what people really want. People thrive on feedback, though it's the delivery that matters. And too often, we get the sandwich, which I am not a big proponent of the sandwich. In fact, I call it you know what I call it. Because we are bookending it. Oh, you do this really good, and in the middle you don't do this, but you do this really good. how about we just separate the two and acknowledge people for a job well done, and then also help them by sharing some of the things that maybe they could improve on in a way that helps them actually do that.
Yeah, no, I like that. The other thing that I would add, I had a conversation with somebody else, is allow them to reflect first, right? Because your first R to say, hey, how do you think that went?
Yeah.
And then you've got an open door too, to be able to step in as a leader, because if they've already self-identified it, you can just agree with them.
Yeah.
You can go, you know what? You're absolutely right. Go for it. You got this. Let me know how I can help.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I love it. Gosh, I appreciate being
the
in the room
question,
with you.
right? The question is always the answer. That's where
Yeah,
it starts. Yep.
yeah, I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
What are one or two things that you'd love people to walk away with around this whole topic of basically what you do has a ripple effect, and just being a better leader? I love the 3 R's. What are your thoughts?
The biggest thing I would say is that self-awareness is an endless process.
Mhm.
And so constantly reassessing how we show up, what's the impact that we're having on others, and not just internally, right? But asking for feedback
Mhm.
from the people that report to us, to the people who are our peers, to the people that we work for, right?
Mhm.
The folks that are our leaders. And I think that's the way you get a well-rounded view of how you really show up. But it's endless, and it takes time, and it takes intention to be able to do that.
Well, and I thank you for that. The thing that I would add on that part is, and it doesn't have to be this huge chunk of time. If we start incorporating it into our touch points, key touch points, not like, hi, I saw you in the hallway and what feedback do you have for me? But after meetings or engagements, something like that, that it's showing up. It doesn't take as long as we think it does.
It doesn't. We have this weird concept around time. And I call what you just described, I call in the flow of work, right? Are
Yeah.
we acknowledging people in the flow of work? If we had just a meeting where they need feedback, are we waiting 2 weeks to schedule that? Or are we
No.
just having a few minutes, to catch up right here?
Yeah.
I'll make an impact because if I wait a whole week after a presentation, we've lost all the nuances to it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
give
not only
people
that, and it can feel punitive, right? Because it can come
yeah,
off with, can you come to my office so I can talk to you?
right.
I'm like, no, no, I can't. I'm busy.
Well, to your point around the impact, the ripple effect, think about how many times, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I certainly have, when your boss says, hey, can I see you on Monday morning? And they send that out on
Yes.
Friday at
Oh,
6
the whole
o'clock.
weekend you're going, I've been fired.
What's happening? What did I do wrong?
They don't want to do it on a Friday. They're going to do it on a Monday.
Exactly.
We don't need to talk about it now, but we do. We do need to talk about it now. Because I can't wait the whole weekend.
Thanks for that.
The only other thing I would add to all this stuff, right, is while we're in the process of feedback, a lot of times we tend to focus on just the opportunities that exist. Except, there's a couple things. Give yourself grace. And by the way, while I'm saying these words, I'm saying them to myself as well. Give yourself grace. And when people give you feedback that's a compliment, say thank you.
That's all you need to say.
Yes, because a lot of times people go, oh no, it's no big deal, or just say thank you,
Yeah.
accept it. Because it took as much courage for someone to give you a compliment as it took for someone to give you the opportunity. So just that's my 2 cents that I'll add to all the great stuff that you had. So thank you.
Wise words, very wise words.
Thank you. So this has been Leadership Soundbites with Laurie and Michelle. And until next time, please like, share, subscribe, and you are welcome in this room anytime, ma'am.
Thank you,
So
Michelle.
thank
Thanks for
you.
having me.
Oh, anytime. All right.
All right.
Until next